My name is Michael Hiller, and I'm a family lawyer here in Houston, Texas. I grew up in a family of lawyers. I have one brother who's a doctor. We call him the black sheep. But my dad was a lawyer. I have two brothers who are attorneys. My dad was also a law professor. And my mom was a social worker. And I think I ended up in family law, perhaps in part because my dad was a business lawyer and my mom was a therapist. And I think that's kind of what you have to do to be a divorce lawyer, a family lawyer, and so forth. Here in Houston, Texas, we do regular divorces, which can be anything from uncontested to hotly contested cases, people with a few dollars all the way up to people with millions of dollars. We also have some unique programs. We do something called Divorce in a Box, which helps keep the cost and time you take for your divorce down. We also have a program called Reconciliation Law, which helps you stay together if that's what you want to do. I'm in business primarily to provide a living for my family and to provide excellent legal services for the public. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, graduated from Bel Air High School, and I went to Brown University as an undergraduate, and that's in Rhode Island, far away from here. I went there primarily because it gave me an opportunity to meet people from all over the world and to get a really good education. After college, I worked in New York for a while, came back to Houston, worked a little bit longer, and then decided to go to law school. I went to the University of Houston Law School, where my dad was a law professor, and although I threatened to go to South Texas because of a little more education on being a trial lawyer there, he wasn't real happy, and we worked it out, and I decided to go to the University of Houston. And so from there, I've been learning ever since to become the best lawyer I can be. Well, I've been in business since I've been married, since 1982, but I wasn't a lawyer then. I was helping my wife with her interior design business, and then I got in the insurance business and did that for several years. Back in the old days, lawyers like my dad did several things, and one of the things they did was he and his partner, they had an insurance business, and I took that over for a while. Then I went to law school, and after I graduated, I worked for someone else, continued to help my wife, and then went on my own as a lawyer 4 years later. I think it was 1993. My business is set up as a corporation, and in Texas we have something called professional corporation, and that's for accountants and lawyers, I think primarily. Doctors have their own designation called a professional association. And then in addition, the corporation is an S corporation, which allows us to have the protections of a corporation. That is, it's more difficult for someone to get a judgment against my personal assets, but also it allows us to more easily do accounting because the income flows through to me personally. I don't have to pay double taxes, let's say, as I would on a larger, more regular corporation. I market my business in several ways. Primarily, I do it through a website and through social media. Originally, when I first went out on my own, I took a lot of people out to lunch. I went to see therapists. I went to see non-family lawyers. I went to see other people who could refer me business. I gave talks, a lot of different ways. A lot of family lawyers, for example, give talks at seminars, which are primarily aimed at other family lawyers. And that's not something I've really chosen to do a lot of. I really prefer to get my message out directly to the public, and I really love technology. And so therefore, websites and social media are really perfect for me. Computers and technology have definitely impacted the way we conduct business. First, I want to say that in general, lawyers are not that technologically oriented. We happen to be. One reason is I think it really helps. Another reason I happen to like technology. But first and foremost, I think that computers have allowed us to speed up our communication with our clients. When I first started practicing, everything was either done by phone call, fax, or even snail mail. But now we can email clients, they can email us. We text them, they text us. If you can't get a hold of me, I always say text me. I give out my cell phone, not maybe to everybody, but I do give it out to my clients. So that's one way technology and computers have affected us. In addition, of course, now we can do all of our work on computers. Here at Hiller and Associates, Hiller Law Firm, we actually use cloud technology. We use a very safe one that's protected from hackers as much as anyone we've seen out there. And so when we go to look for our work late at night before a trial, it's right there on the computer. We don't have to come back to the office. Everything's there that we might need, even if we left everything here the night before. In addition, even the way we create documents, we use a cloud-based service and we use artificial intelligence. A series of questions comes up and then we answer them. If another lawyer or my assistant, my legal assistant started the document, I can pick up right where she left off. I can even go back to the beginning of the document and all the answers are saved. I can see what answers she chose and I can make changes if they're necessary. Those are just some of the ways that technology and computers affect the way we do things. I seek advice for my business from some people. When my dad was alive, I definitely sought advice from him. We talked regularly since he practiced law for 50 years here in Houston, even though it was very different, his being a business lawyer. And since he passed away, I do seek advice from my wife. I seek advice from my associate, Nancy Whittemore. I occasionally seek advice from other attorneys that I practice with. But primarily, because we do a lot of innovation, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out better ways clients can get divorced. It may sound funny, but there are better ways versus a totally nasty, long, drawn-out, expensive divorce or custody fight. And I also spend a lot of time trying to help people figure out ways that they can stay together. I think that's important, that the family lawyer, the divorce lawyer, so to speak, come up with innovation. So a lot of the times where I'd be seeking advice, I'm actually researching, trying to find out things that I think can help clients. There are definitely ethical concerns in our type of practice. Some of them are when you have a client that wants you to make something up as opposed to get at the truth. That's obviously an ethical concern. When you have a situation where the other lawyer is asking you something that later you're going to have to back up with evidence, that's an ethical concern. When you're in court and you don't know the answer to something and it's important to get that information in front of the judge, sometimes it's better to say, you know, Your Honor, I don't know. We're going to have to go find that out, because a lot of times we're in court after just 3 days into the case. We at Hiller Law try to overcome ethical problems as follows. The family law system, by its very nature, has no limits. You can ask a lawyer to file a motion right after you file the original petition. You can ask for all kinds of things, some of which need to happen. Someone usually needs to move out, and bills need to get paid. There has to be temporary custody. There are things that need to happen if you can't figure out a way to get the other side to agree. But there really otherwise are no limits. Hardly any lawyer is ever going to get punished for filing 100 motions or requesting thousands of documents when only maybe 10 are necessary. So we overcome them by trying to call the other lawyer at the beginning, by inviting them to go to mediation early, even when it's not required, by introducing them to this idea of divorce in a box, which is really collaborative law, combined with binding arbitration. So regardless, there are ways that we can do that, and we try to give clients as many choices that make sense in their case. At Hiller Law, we use a variety of channels to market our business. First of all, we've had a website for, as far as I know, we were one of the first law firms to have a website in Houston, believe it or not, even though we've only been around for 25 years, 26 years, something like that. At any rate, we also use social media. We've been on Facebook and all the other Twitter, all the main social media for a long time. We've been doing that. A lot of lawyers are definitely dinosaurs. they're old school, and we've always prided ourselves on using technology in as much as it makes sense for us. In addition, now we've been doing internet radio with All Business Media FM, and we've had about 6 shows and going to do about 6 more. So we use a variety of outlets to get the word on our business out there. I attribute our success at Hiller Law to a variety of things. First and foremost, there's hard work. Secondly, of course, you have to have an education. You got to go to law school. You've got to understand the basic concepts that make you into a good lawyer. You have to keep studying all the time. Even if you don't read everything that's out there that's thrown your way, there are a lot of things you just have to keep up with. But mostly there's hard, and then of course we hear about smart work. There's no question you have to be smart about the way you prepare. You have to get to know your client's case. You have to understand what is needed. Is a hearing needed right away? Is a long pleading needed right away? Whatever it is, it's just whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, what is needed for that particular case. A lot of lawyers use cookie cutter approaches. They do the same thing in every case. I don't think that's what's needed. Sometimes you got to litigate from day one. Sometimes you got to negotiate from day one. Sometimes all you're doing is drafting a document for somebody. So whatever it is, you have to try to fit. It's like a doctor, one of my doctors from a few years ago said, try not to treat your patient. He doesn't try to treat his patients with a book off the shelf. I try not to treat my clients with just taking a book off the shelf and whatever it says, do it. I chose this current location because, first of all, an old friend of mine who has the law firm, is the head of the law firm that we share offices with, came to me, but I've pretty much always officed within 5 miles of where I am now. We are smack dab in the middle of Houston. And when I say Houston, I mean greater Houston. Houston has grown tremendously. I was born here, I grew up here, only was gone for college, but this is near the Galleria, which is right in the middle of every suburban area that surrounds Houston, and I couldn't be happier with my location. Our business is unique in a variety of ways. For one thing, there's really nothing like family law and divorce law. There's nothing that's similar to it that I know of. For one thing, you have to be a part-time psychologist, you have to be a fierce litigator, you have to be able to go to court, you have to know how to negotiate, you have to know how to hold somebody's hand to get them through it, and you have to understand a little bit about every area of the law, because one day you might be valuing a client's business, another day you have to be concerned about their tax issues, bankruptcy can come up, just about any area of the law that does exist can come up in family law. Divorce in a Box is something I created beginning this past summer that allows you to limit the cost and limit the time spent on your divorce. Primarily, it takes 2 different types of ways that you could resolve your case that already exists. One is collaborative law, and one is binding arbitration. In a nutshell, collaborative law is when you and your lawyer and the other spouse and their lawyer agree that the lawyers won't take your case to court. Binding arbitration is where you go to a third party, often a retired judge or a lawyer with experience, and that person serves as a private judge that makes binding decisions just like a judge would. By combining them, we take the best elements of collaborative law, which is you're negotiating to try to keep your case out of court, and what you get in a courtroom, which is a decision. So by taking binding arbitration and combining it with collaborative law, henceforth, divorce in a box, you have a system that you're not going to run into too many problems. Because in collaborative law, there are things that can come up where you stop cooperating. Well, guess what? You bring in, or stop collaborating. You bring in the binding arbitrator to get you back on track. So I'm very excited about it. The advantage of divorce in a box over, say, your typical divorce litigation is that you have no idea where your case is going to go and how long it's going to take. In divorce in a box, at the very first meeting, you can agree on how long you think the case should take. Your two lawyers and you will make an agreement on that. And if one of you thinks it should take 3 months and one of you thinks it should take a year, then you bring in the arbitrator to decide. And again, you get that decision. That is normally not anything that you even get to discuss in court. Some of the biggest problems I see in divorce, the way it's practiced through the courtroom, again, are you never know how long the case is going to take. While the judge may issue something called a scheduling order or a docket control order, and it says your trial is set for November 12th, maybe you filed in March, the chances of it going on November 12th are not very good. It's probably going to get reset not once, not twice, but 3 times if you can't agree at some point on a solution. And the only thing the court's going to make you do is go to mediation. And in mediation, the mediator can't impose a decision on you. So your case could go on for months and months and months. And you don't know what requests the other lawyer is going to send. You don't know if there are going to be depositions. You don't know if they're going to bring 20 witnesses to court. I've seen cases with $10,000 in assets that have 1 child. Somebody turns it into as they say, a federal case when it doesn't need to be. So divorce in a box takes all that and again tries to put your divorce in a box, tries to contain it a little bit, and you get to be a part of that. Since we just created divorce in a box, I don't always know which case is going to be good for it, but I will tell you the ones that I'm aware of now. If I know the other lawyer is the kind of lawyer that is going to be willing to meet with me in their office or in my office to create some plan, some roadmap that we can both live by, that's the kind of case that I'm first going to consider for divorce in a box. If the other lawyer is someone who only knows one way, who, if you ask him if they're a litigator, they'll say, I'm a litigator. This is what I do. That's not, and some of them are my friends, but I would not approach them on doing divorce in a box with me. The other factors that definitely come into play are, what is the character that I can tell about the two parties? Generally, while our clients are not perfect here at Hiller Law, we attract people, it seems, that are a little more honest and a little more responsible for their own actions. So if they come in, our client that is, and they tell us that their spouse is a jerk, a narcissist, someone who cannot see your point of view, they've already done things that are unbelievably inconsiderate and sometimes violent, that's probably not going to be a good divorce in a box case. Theoretically, all of them can be because we can bring the arbitrator in to break ties and so forth. But right now, I don't see those kind of cases as being great candidates. On the other hand, they also make the worst litigation cases. When someone, the word narcissist seems to be thrown around a lot these days in the United States for reasons I don't need to get into. But while it may be overused, I do see it a lot in family court. And those are folks that they're not going to give up no matter what. Some have almost no money, and they will fight for their victory as long as it takes. Some have tons of money, and they will fight for their victory as long as it takes. And they don't seem to care about how it affects the other person, even their own pocketbook. And definitely they don't seem to care how it affects their kids. Divorce Savvy is a program that a friend of mine and her partner from Georgia developed. And it is a program where you and or your spouse can sit down and with the smallest amount of Excel knowledge, you can, which is a spreadsheet program, you can input all of your assets, all of your debts. In Texas, we divide those into separate and community property, but it can be used in other states as well. There's a place to put down every hour of the week where you or your soon-to-be ex might have the kids, so you can divide that up or play with it, with or without your lawyer, with or without a mediator or arbitrator. There's a place to put your budgets, and if you know anything about Microsoft Excel, then when you hit one button, it moves another button. In other words, the numbers, as you change them, start to shift around and do addition and subtraction and all that multiplication, all that kind of thing you need as you move through your divorce. So I think it's an excellent tool that can save you hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of dollars, because lawyers are generally not mathematicians. They're not CPAs. And this is a software program that is something that CPAs use. It's kind of like the TurboTax for family law and divorce. So I highly recommend it and think it can really help you keep your costs down and keep your stress and your emotional and your spiritual costs under control as well. We have recently introduced consulting as part of our offerings here at Hiller Law Firm. The reason for that primarily is because we want to reach people across the United States. As a lawyer, I can only practice in Texas. I can practice to some extent in federal court in other jurisdictions, but family law rarely goes into federal court. So consulting gives us an opportunity to consult with people across the United States, including judges, lawyers, law firms, bar associations, and even individuals. For example, with our reconciliation law program, we can consult with people throughout the United States. We can consult with a couple or an individual and give them some guidance as to how to go about marriage education, relationship education. We can consult with pretty much anybody about divorce in a box. In other words, if I can't practice in Minnesota, I can talk to a group of family lawyers about that. I can help them set up the programs. And we think that's perfect for today's day and age with the advent of the internet, video conferencing. It really gives us an opportunity to reach a lot more people than we could have, say, 20 years ago. Some of the other worst things that you can have happen to you in a nasty divorce or custody case are the judge can appoint, and often does appoint, someone to represent your children. That adds to the cost immediately. It takes some control away from you over your kids right away. Now, theoretically, it could help settle your case, but for the most part, I haven't found that to be the case. You can have a really good amicus, is what we call them in Texas, ad litem, maybe in other states. But whatever it is, the court can also make appointments for psychologists to evaluate you and your spouse. And for that matter, your kids, to see who is the better fit for custody. Now you've brought in another person whose opinion is going to be important to the judge. And that's the big thing to remember, is that the so-called best interest of the child statute, in my opinion, that concept is really just the judge's opinion. This is no offense to judges, but I think it's important to realize that how expansive that is, how you can suddenly look at everything under the sun to decide what's best for your kids. Generally, I think parents know what's best for their kids, but when you get a divorce, often the two of you disagree and it becomes magnified. One of the things that's bothered me for a long time is the lack of innovation in family law. While there have been excellent developments such as mediation, such as collaborative law, for the most part, collaborative law has not done very well in the United States, even though the purpose was to keep things under control and to keep things out of court. Mediation, which I used to do when I first started practicing regularly, and we did mediation 28 years ago, primarily without attorneys even being in the room. Now mediation, especially in Texas, is primarily used at the end of a case or before a hearing as part of the litigation landscape. So the innovation that we've seen hasn't even been used the way I think it should be. Reconciliation law is something I developed several years ago. I don't know the moment that it hit me, but at some point in the last 15 years, it hit me that none of my colleagues, mediators, lawyers, arbitrators, judges, none of them were talking about people staying together. It appeared to me we were living in a divorce culture where that seemed to be the answer for any problem in a marriage. I began to explore what was out there, and I discovered something called marriage and relationship education. And that's different from marriage counseling, although there is a correlation. Marriage counseling usually doesn't work. Unfortunately, no matter how many wonderful therapists and counselors there are out there, the typical tools that are used in marriage counseling don't usually cause the couple to keep coming back and to work on the marriage. They don't necessarily give them the skills that they need. And that's really the big change. I think it was 1998 when a gentleman named Bill Doherty from Minnesota announced at a conference of therapists and clergy that marriage counseling officially doesn't work anymore. And while it does work in some cases, of course, what he was trying to say is there's something better now, that we can teach people skills such as conflict management, communication, and other skills you need to have a healthy relationship. Some people have virtually no skills with money. They don't have a clue. If you tell them the interest rate on their credit card is 24%, they'll say, so what? Someone else knows immediately what you're talking about. That's a high interest rate. And you have to know that when you're using a credit card, what your interest rate is. So this has nothing to do with love. And when you think about it, most of the skills we need for marriage and relationships, you want to be in love with the person, right? But you need to have the skills to maintain a long-term, lifelong relationship. So reconciliation law is when you take the legal system and combine it with an opportunity to show people that they may be able to improve their marriage even before it gets started. And so one thing we have is a prenuptial agreement, which includes marriage booster clauses. And so if a couple comes to me and one of them says, I want a prenuptial agreement, we just got a call today about that, we may suggest, and we will suggest, that they put in a marriage booster clause. Because no matter how much they love this person now, if they don't have the skills to handle a fight that might come up in 6 months, their marriage could be over quickly. Or it may just bring the seeds of a long-term difficult relationship. So we can introduce the idea of pre-marriage education, of post-marriage education. There are so many programs out there, it's almost ridiculous how little the public knows about it. There's a book and a program called Couple Checkup, where you go for a couple checkup every year. So we can do it through prenups. If your marriage is in trouble, we can do it through post-nuptial agreements, where we can say, okay, if you get divorced, here's the way your divorce will be. We can lay it all out, the property division, what you do with your kids, the whole bit. But we can also say, you know what? We're going to put some education in there, some clauses that say you're going to go to this particular person or read these books. We're going to try to customize it for you. And that will really help, we think, with your success of your marriage. The other thing we do is we file pre-divorce petitions and anti-divorce petitions. And those are fairly straightforward, although most people haven't heard of them. For example, a pre-divorce petition would say to your spouse, and you'd send it to them in a letter or an email, that I really don't want a divorce, but there are some things that you just don't want to work on the marriage with me. And so here are some things I'd like to address. Otherwise, you'll see in this envelope or in this attachment to the email that I'll have to file for divorce because I don't know what else to do, but I don't want the divorce. An anti-divorce petition is the same thing, but we take it a step further and we go ahead and file it with the courts. That was a long answer.
That was a long answer.